And so with that, it's now time for our closing session, The Way Forward, How to Implement and Finance Gender Transformative Measures in the Urban Transport Sector. To lead this discussion will be Sonal Shah, who's the founder of Urban Catalyst, who you've met a few times today, and Executive Director of CSEC, the Center for Sustainable and Equitable Cities. Sonal, I would now invite you to the stage to provide the introduction for our final panel.
Hi, I think we have 6 speakers. And me, I can stand if there isn't another chair for us. Yeah, I could. 6 chairs? Yeah. Oh, awesome. Okay. So we're now at the end of the day, and I have a very, very exciting group of speakers with me. What will we talk about? We've spoken about a lot today. We've spoken about the need to move from car towards care. We've spoken about the 4 Rs, yes, resilience, representation, rights, and we will focus on the last part, resources. So we'll talk money, because we know budget allocations reflect institutional support. And I think I'm really, really privileged to have an exciting panel. May I please invite all the speakers to the dais, please. Dr. Amani Abou-Zeid, Commissioner for Infrastructure, Energy and Digitalization, African Union Commission. Chiara Corazza, French representative, G20 Empower member, G7 Gender Equality Advisory Council. I think select, it's up to you, wherever you want to sit. Insa Illgen, Project Director for Sustainable Mobility, GIZ TUMI. Lindsey Mancini, Senior Director, Membership, Marketing and Services, UITP. Nicolas Peltier-Thiberge, Global Director for Transport, World Bank. Dr. Frank Weiler, Head of Division, Sustainable Mobility and Social Development, KfW Development Bank. I think we have a detailed bio in the book, so please refer to that. And I'd like to kickstart. No, why don't you? Okay. No, why don't you come? I think I'll just stand. Okay. Awesome. So I think I'll jump right in. Are we all ready, my panelists? Are we ready? Awesome. Okay. So my first question, Amani. You are a champion of gender equity, and you've been voted as one of Africa's most influential women numerous times. How do you foster gender equity in your current work as African Union Commissioner for Infrastructure, Energy and Digitalization, all of which are very, very tough sectors from a gender perspective?
Thank you very much for inviting me to TUMI event and for this session. May I just, before I start my intervention, say just one little thing to the Honorable Senator Crystal. Honorable Senator, I am Muslim, and in the Quran there's a saying that it's not the eyes that go blind, it's the hearts in the chests. So thank you for pointing out how blind all of us are, and that we are all disabled except for you. So thank you very much for that. As for being gender champion, I think we are all gender champions. We are, I mean, those who in this room who are women and doing what women do, those who are men supporting what women do, so all of us are gender champions. And it starts with your upbringing, how your parents raised you, how your mom raised you, the kind of challenges that you were able to take, you were willing to take, you decided to take throughout your life, not shying away from anything that you want, taking, I mean, because no one gives you anything, making sure that you take what you really want. And then if I talk about myself, I'm sure that everyone in this room can say exactly the same thing about their journey. So in that sense, we are all gender champions. But in my current position or in previous positions, I think when you are in any position like mine or anyone's here on this panel or the audience, people look up to you. And that this in itself kind of made them see that it is possible for me as well to do it. It is possible to go that direction, either as when I started as an engineer or later on in international organizations, or if elected like I was elected. And remember, those who have elected me are heads of states and governments, meaning that when people talk about Africa, and I would like to say a different story about all the Africa we've been hearing about this morning, we're also, I mean, convinced that a woman can take the position of its infrastructure, I mean, to lead the continent on infrastructure, on energy, on digital. So it says something also about our countries and how they are changing. We have to also recognize that Africa has been changing drastically and to the better in so many ways over the several decades. There are problems, of course, but they are everywhere. And as I said earlier in a session where we were, let's not start or continue dividing the world into the global north and the global south as if the south is, you know, sitting passively waiting for the north to show them the way. That's not true. First, because problems are everywhere, and that's because we should all be empowered and take, as I said, you know, matters into our own hands. In the current work as well that we are doing at the African Union, how this transcends in what we do. First, we have our programs that we insist that they are gender sensitive. I also established the African Women in Infrastructure to make sure that looking into women across all the sectors that I cover, which are by definition worldwide are male dominated. We developed, you know, toolkits on, you know, strategy and policy level, you know, to educate policymakers and strategists how to ensure that the gender lens, the gender sensitivity is provided in everything that we do. We promote women not as ones to be consulted, not as ones to be considered as beneficiaries, but women also as decision makers, women as owners of big transport, big energy firms, women as, you know, managers of railways. We want to see women in all infrastructure leading, taking decisions, not just be the groups that is being consulted. We want to change the narrative for all of us. And I'm not just talking about Africa. I think this can resonate all around the world. And this is really the change we all of us should be aiming to. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You've spoken about women as decision makers, and I think that's a really, really important point. Coming to you, Nicolas, the World Bank is one of the key funding agencies in the development sector, and how does the World Bank ensure gender equity in their transport portfolio? And what do you see as one major challenge? You have only one major challenge to identify for us, but before that, yeah.
Thank you, Sonal, and I really want to thank TUMI for organizing this event and inviting us. This is a very important conversation because there's no way a transport program, whatever it is, can reach its ambitions, whether it is to improve the quality of life of people, whether it's creating jobs, whether it's increasing productivity, it's connecting people, without thinking about gender inclusion. No? And beyond gender inclusion, I would add universal access, and we heard the very powerful words from Senator Abou-Zeid just now, and I think it's important also to add that element in our discussion today. When I started at the World Bank, one of my best experience has been in a program on rural roads in Peru. And what I'm mentioning this because it illustrates how we have to think about this issue from the very beginning of where we think about designing a transport operation. And in that particular example, we were thinking about rehabilitating X kilometers of rural roads, and the authorities we were working with were telling us, and this is what we need. No, rural roads where cars can travel. But then we organized a focus group with poor women from rural communities, and the conversation completely changed now, because women told us that, well, we don't have the resources to use motorized transport. We walk, and so what was having the most impact in terms of reducing poverty, in terms of development, was not the rural roads. It was those pedestrian paths, the former Inca Trail, that women were using to work, that families were deciding to send girls to school because the path the travel was safe enough. And when we evaluated this program 5 years later, we found out that this was the project activity that had the greatest impact on reducing poverty. So just to illustrate how a simple conversation with female users can completely change the perspective on a transport program. I think now we've kind of internalized that, and that each time we start thinking about working on a transport project, our task team leaders are thinking about gender inclusion. One incentive that we've introduced at the World Bank was what we call a gender tagging. No? And so every single operation is evaluated on to what extent they promote gender inclusion. And in order to get the tag, they need first to have disaggregated data, so that we can understand the differences in mobility between men and women. It needs to have a result indicators in the result framework, so that we know that there is an intention and a tracking mechanism, and it needs to demonstrate that it aims at closing the gender gap now. And this is a bit mechanical, but it really changed. It kind of built some incentives in the way we do our work. And I'm happy to report that, after 5 years, when we started to introduce this gender tagging, now we have 95% of all the transport projects that we finance that are tagged. And I was looking in the plane at the last quarterly report, and we even reached 100%. No? So, this kind of built now into the DNA of the way we work. No? I want to give you another example, and that brings me to the challenge, which is the challenge remains how you convince policymakers that gender inclusion is important, and for that you need data. And I'll give you one example of where we were able to make that case, which comes from the Middle East and from 3 cities that we studied: Beirut, Cairo, and Amman. And we know in that region that there is a problem of women participation in the labor force. Now it's very strange, because women tend to have a greater enrollment at university than men, yet their participation in the labor force is extremely low. Now, I think it's 13% for Amman, 19% for Cairo, 33% for Beirut, where it should be 50% now. And so to understand what was going on, we built a survey, and we asked women, well, what prevents you to enter the labor market? And And many of them, 60% actually in Amman mentioned that, well, it's the lack of safe, reliable, and affordable transportation systems that prevents us to enter the labor market. No? And then we did some modeling, and we said, well, what about if we improve safety by 5 percentile points? What would happen? And then you find that incredible result. Also, 60,000 more women could enter the labor force in Amman, more than 300,000 in Cairo. So really big transformational numbers, and that completely changes the conversation with decision makers. When you are able to bring those data, you change the conversation. No? So that's a bit one way we are trying to overcome this challenge at the World Bank. No?
Thank you, Nicola. Highlighting the importance, one, of the gender tagging process, and showing policymakers what the impact of the intervention will be, seem to be the two key takeaways. Coming to you, Frank. KfW is Germany's development bank and has a long history in financing transport projects, both in Germany as well as partner countries of BMZ. How has the feminist development policy influenced your ambition in the transport sector?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Mm-hmm. Okay, it's working. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be here and to be part of the panel. Indeed, as a development bank, we have a longer history in sort of working in the transport sector, although in the urban area we're relatively new. So we have experience, we have evaluated projects, and we have seen that especially transport projects can have a very big impact in promoting gender equality. Some of our projects in rural areas, rural road projects, showed that, for instance, the access for girls to secondary schools was improved very much through rehabilitation of rural roads. So there is a big potential which is there. And the question of our development policy, which is more sort of feminist with our new government, gives us more incentives to improve on that. So we do have some experience, but we see a lot of challenges, and the challenge comes to really addressing all the projects that we are doing and to see what potential is in there. We have seen and we have heard today that there is no one-size-fits-all solution to transport projects. It depends very much on the context, what to do. To give you just one example, in segregated metro compartments for women, in some contexts it may work. So we have been told, for instance, in Sao Paulo, Brazil, that it's been taken up as an improvement for women. Whereas in other contexts, for instance, Argentina, we heard that this is sort of more creating problems and so having a segregation which is seen as a negative thing. So we have to be aware that we do not try to find very simple solutions that work in all the contexts, and we have to evaluate each context very specifically. And as a development bank, we don't do this by our own, but we rely on consultants. So one of the challenges really is to identify the correct measures and also to identify good sort of partners and good of consultancies that can help us improve this. So coming to the ambition, I would define it as follows. I would say our ambition is really to analyze more systematically than in the past the opportunities that are there, not to overlook any opportunity that is there, and then also to monitor the effects and the impacts to see whether it has worked or has not worked. So how do we do this as a development bank? Of course, we always need sort of internal guidelines. So one step was to improve what we had already, to have internal trainings, to raise awareness among our colleagues on the topics, and also to find, as I said, good partners and good consultants consultancies that help us improve on our projects. So I think this conference is a very good opportunity to do this, to get some ideas and to make some contacts, and that's why I'm very glad to be here. Thank you.
Okay. And we also hope that it radically influences your investments towards gender equity, now that you have both the experts as well as a very enabling policy. Chiara, a gender-responsive procurement process can be very useful to facilitate women's access to capital and to foster their entrepreneurship. What are the opportunities for this?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and thank you so much to the organizer, to TUMI, to GIS, and to ITF who invited me here. I'm really delighted to be with you, and I like very much women mobilizing women with men, because the active ones are there, and I'm so happy that there are at least 2 men in the panel with us, because when I was organizing my Women's Forum, I was also searching for champions that would come on our panel, and they were afraid to be with so many women. Then I'm really happy that you're there on our side. I just wanted to say that we worked a lot, and I wanted to share with you what I personally presented to Chancellor Scholz beginning of December. It's the work that we did last year under German presidency of the G7, and we focused on 7 topics, and one of those is ownership, investment, and entrepreneurship, because money, at the end of the day, it's the most important thing. If women don't have access to capital, if women don't have the same opportunity of financing than men, we will never get the capacity to do what we want to do, and of course accede to the leadership position. Normally when I come in this kind of conference, I speak about my favorite one. It's about STEM education, because I'm deeply convinced that only with STEM education we will have the same opportunity to be there, we can contribute to change the world. But here, really, because we're talking about capitals, I would like to highlight something that's not so very well known, that we bring to the head of state and government, to the public stakeholders, but also to the private stakeholders. It's how we can leverage public procurement and private procurements as a tool to better finance startups, entrepreneurs, women and men, by the way, and making sure that everybody can benefit of the same opportunities. I just give an example. If men and women would have the same part in the economic world, you all know that the fact and figures, we would add 28 trillion to the global GDP. And Kristalina Georgieva on the 8th of March added something else, that we would have 20% of growth. And in this moment, we really need growth if women and men were equally represented in the economy. Talking about transportation, there is 2 issues. First, who is designing the procurement? If you see how give the priority in the public procurements, you see that in many fields, women are present on the market. But there's a chance, because you have a lot of startups created by women that are more on sustainability, on climate change, and corresponding to some innovative measures in transportation and practical transportation. And this is something new. And as you know, women have access only to 2% of venture capital worldwide. The second thing that's a good improving is that we have a solution to bring women to public procurement. And it's not quota. It's not quota. Some countries did quotas. By the way, it's forbidden in many countries, but personally, I'm completely against, because I don't see why our products and our quality should not be the same as the men, and we could not compete in the same way. And in fact, what we did, and it worked because we proposed it at the G20, we worked with the Draghi government, hand by hand, and we proposed something that's called the Simplification Act, number 47, and we just give extra rewards to companies who respect the law in terms of governance, when there are quotas or not, respect the law in terms of equal pay, respect the law in terms of equal opportunity or career environment, and of course to do efforts for work-life balance, for creating a favorable environment for women to work and to make career in the company. And to exclude from public tenders those who don't respect the law. So simple as that. And I'm very proud because France has not taken everything, but on the 8th of March, Elisabeth Borne, by the way, former president of RATP, a transportation company, announced that now French companies that don't respect the law will be excluded by tenders. And you can imagine what is the amount of money that could go to women entrepreneurs. Actually, we have 224 women entrepreneurs in the world, exceeding less than 1% of public procurement. Less than 1%. And in transportation, again, we need to diversify the supply chain. We need to have also inputs coming for women. We need to have also subtractors that are women, because we just have in mind a different way of using and consuming the public transportation, the aviation, etc., etc. Then it would benefit for each of us. And again, it can be done. And I can tell you that Chancellor was very happy about that. And I do hope that Germany will be the second one to follow after Italy. And we bring it also in the G20 now. I'm representing today the G20. We bring it now at the G20 and in the presidency as one of the strong proposals, because it's something very new. We didn't use this tool until now. Then I invite you all to think about, and by the way, at the end of the day, because it's business, all companies who diversified their supply chain say that they gain in performance and profitability, more than 40%. Then you see, it's business. But it's also, of course, equal opportunities for women to contribute to create this better system of transportation, a better system of living that we all need.
Thank you. Public procurement, and I think that has a very, very important role to play, which gets me to you, Lindsey, as UITP and as an organization with public transport authorities to a large extent. So the transport sector, as we all know, is very male-dominated. How is UITP addressing this lack of diversity? And again, one challenge. I know there are many. We want that one critical challenge. And any positive surprises, if any?
Thank you, Sonal. Thank you very much. And it's been quite a day so far, very inspiring. It's a real honor to be here. Yes, UITP is the Association of Public Transport, so mainly the operators and the authorities that are delivering public transport in our cities around the world. And it all started maybe, 5 years ago. Apparently that seems to be the magic number. About 5 years ago, when we got a new Secretary General, and we realized that on our management team, there were no women in our boards, there were no women in our panels, there were very few women, and our Secretary General invited me to assist him to try and sort that out a little bit. So basically, cut a long story short, we developed a gender equality policy, and we've been implementing it over the last few years. And we now, in 2023, we have pretty much a balanced management team. We have our executive board is now more than a third women, up from 0%. So we're not yet there, but it's a massive improvement. We've completely eradicated manuals, no more manuals at UITP, and we've doubled the number of women that we have speaking in our events. Those are some of the highlights of what we've managed to achieve in the last few years just by having this policy. And I think, we always have to go back to the reason of why this is important. And it's not just because it's kind of trendy at the moment to address diversity. It's not just because it makes perfect business sense, although that does speak to many people. It's back to the. I mean, I couldn't sit here on this stage and talk about gender equality in public transport if back in my organization is run by men. It just doesn't make any sense. It's not part of our values, and we need to practice what we preach. So as an association, which is very representative of the industry, we realize that we really need to show leadership here in a sector which is not really showing leadership. And although it may be, it's just the association of, it's a very important baseline, we believe, in order to promote change. And it means that when we engage with the World Bank or the other investment banks or the other international institutions, we have more women thinking about where we're going to invest our funds, where we're going to direct our members. We've got more women thinking about the policy messages that UITP is putting out there every day. And so yes, it does make a difference, and we hope that it will really inspire the sector to take this a little bit more seriously, because at the end of the day, back to what Robin was saying right at the beginning, it's not just about being gender equal on your board. It's because public transport and mobility in cities is what gives life to our communities. And women need to move, and women tend to be a lot more reflective of the needs of others. And so it's really, really, really important. Maybe in terms of the main challenges and barriers, there's so many, I don't know. There's not,
only one.
I tell you what.
Lindsey, one.
There's not that many barriers. I mean, just in terms of what UITP has done in implementing a policy, there were no barriers. Men didn't dare tell me no. I think. But what you really need, on the other hand, is enablers. You need enablers, you need champions, you need male champions. We need all of the guys in this room that are here also flying the flag and making sure that gender equality is everywhere. And I think that's the key. It's, from a policy perspective in our sense, it's less about the barriers, because the barriers, they don't stand up to the arguments. They just don't. But you do need enablers, and you need people to be constantly reminding and constantly fighting, and bringing it back to the underlying reasons for doing it, which is it makes business sense, but also this is what communities need to be, and so we need to practice what we preach. Thank you.
Absolutely. And hopefully some of the lessons around public procurement may also come to some of the UITP members as well. Right? Insa, over to you. GIZ is an implementing agency. And as an implementing agency, are gender mainstreaming approaches sufficient, or do they sometimes even hinder gender transformative approaches?
I think that's the key question probably of the day. And it's not an easy one. And I was just reading the title of this session. And to be quite honest, I think we all have no idea. Because we are very good in gender sensitive and maybe even gender responsive actions. But when it comes to core gender transformative measures, I believe that we have no idea. When it comes to good data, I would challenge that we have good data, because all the data that we gather is not including the data of the trips that are not being done by females and marginalized groups because they feel not safe. How people behave is often not tracked. In how we gather gender data, it doesn't reflect why someone is, for instance, not sharing that they were harassed and that they didn't feel safe. I just shared this yesterday, that we had in our gender data analysis, like one case where there's in our ride-alongs with the women. And something we do as women, and we don't even realize that we are doing things. So there was a bus stop, and there was a perfectly free bench to sit on. But the woman was not sitting down. It was shaded, it was free, it was not dirty. So the ride-along accompanying person asked someone, like, why are you like walking around and not sitting still in the shadow? And it's like, never thought about it, but it doesn't feel safe. And I'm pretty sure that many of us, I do that, and I realized that after the study. If I'm in a subway and I'm alone and there's a free bench, I will never sit down. Because why? I'm very vulnerable if someone sits next to me, and I don't want to offend anyone when I get up. So what you do, you stay in movement. And we are all representing large organizations, and I think we also need to be quite frank. We are at the beginning and we have no idea. So if we really want to do this, and for us, as women mobilized women, we are not as diverse as we want it to be. But this is why, for us, the step towards feminism and feminist voices, was actually a step to include all genders, include marginalized groups, and also really take a step back for us as an initiative and really feel like, where do we have to learn? And I really feel that we are at the beginning, and on all of our shoulders, I think there's a special burden that we really need to figure it out, because we have funds and we have power to implement projects. So I would really advise all of us to not do the easy thing to say, oh yeah, we had this one good example, let's continue and let's redo that. Let's reassess and let's really sit on this and really think about what we heard from Senator Crystal. Like, do we actually really understand what this means? Do we address this properly? I would say no, I want to learn. I have so many questions now, and I feel like we are lacking in understanding different needs and diversity, and I really think that this is something that we should not brush off easily. So gender mainstreaming doesn't solve anything. I think gender transformative does. I'm so happy about the feminist development policy, but there's so much work behind it, and I think we need to be open that there is a lot to do.
Okay. I think what you said was quite provocative in that we don't know. And I think a lot of, sometimes asking the right questions is more important than having the answers. But I am going to persist a little bit on a gender transformative approach. So Insa, I will start with you because you raised it, and then maybe I also invite other panelists to maybe see and answer this. What, in your opinion, is a gender transformative approach, and what would it look like or be like in transport? So start with you, Insa, and then I invite other panelists, please.
In my perfect scenario, it would be a fully inclusive and, in a sense, like an equity project, which also takes into account that equality is not enough, that we need to aim for equity. It probably doesn't only tackle the transport sector. I think we need to go cross-sectoral, and we need to sit down with the urban planners, we need to sit down with the building sectors, we need to sit down probably also with other sectors that we are not so closely linked to. I don't know, maybe we need to reach out to the care systems, we need to reach out to the health system. I think a full gender transformative project for me in an urban environment would be a cross-sectoral project aiming at equity, and the exact measures, I think that would be a long list and a lot of budget behind it probably.
Okay. Yeah. Amani, you're nodding. Did you want to add to it?
Yes, I'm nodding because for those, how many engineers are in this room? Just raise, wow, as I expected. No, but that's good. I'm happy with that. That means that there are women in STEM. That's good. That's very good. But the first thing I say to my team for the last 15 years, infrastructure are social projects. Mm-hmm. They are social projects. I was raised like my sister here from Bogota as an engineer, thinking of infrastructure as how to be efficient, cost-effective, go from A to B or deliver A and C, and that was, I learned, and I'm not apologizing for that, because thanks to this education and this way of thinking and the analytical work that we do in engineering, I was able also to study social and economic development, and then I learned that it's not about that. It's about people first. And then you use your technical knowledge in order to deliver on the need that people need or your economy needs, if it's an economic infrastructure. So that's why I like very much the intervention it's not how to be transformative, gender transformative approach to gender. It's not to think of it in isolation. You have to address the bigger picture. And we started in our group, the group number 2, 2A or 2B, the one who was talking about resilience. You have to start with the social norms. And we cannot disassociate the fact of a gender discriminating sector from the overall country's policy on gender. So if you have a leadership in your country or in your organization, and I had the privilege of having this, for instance, the African Development Bank. I mean, the president who was very gender sensitive, I had the privilege of seeing this, and I'm going to cite an example that is rarely mentioned in other, happening in other organizations. He recognized that women have to go to the field. You know, women staff, international staff, they have to go, especially if you're an engineer or working in infrastructure, you have to be in the field all the time and you have to travel, and you cannot do that because if you're rearing a child. Now, African Development Bank would pay for the woman, would pay for a nanny or a person for her to make sure that she takes her child and she still is, you know, able to care for her child while being on mission, and that she is not, you know, hindered from or incapacitated in any way possible about the work that she's delivering. That goes back to the issue of enablers. So it's not a clear inhibition, but if I am rearing a child, how am I supposed to deliver on my work or compete to higher positions? That's an example. So it all, I think, goes into what are the enablers in the country? How is your society looking into women discriminating, yes or against? How are you then, who is deciding for a program, a project, a policy, whether they have the heart, the care, and we should not be apologetic about women being more, having more care or caring more. We should not be apologetic for that. That is why we are sitting on that table, because we want to change the narrative, because we want to change things. And that's why we are on that table. We are not just invited to be, as I said, consulted as beneficiaries. We have to make our own perspective and make it count. So I'm nodding because it takes all those things to make a road, just one simple road, that it takes all of this. You have to really understand how people, all of them, how they move, where they move, for what purpose, and then after they move, what do they do? What are the time frames? Where do they sit, stand, talk, eat? It takes all of that to make just one road, and as engineers, that's the easiest part of it. That's the easiest part of it. We can do roads like that. But third population, I'm not sure. Thank you.
Wow. I do want to pick up on this, right? Because I do understand if we are talking about transforming gender relationships, it's about addressing norms. But I'm going to come to you, Nicolas. You know, both Insa and Amani have said it's not only about transport, but you have to have a much broader perspective. Does this limit you? What would you do differently now? Or how would you therefore think about projects in the transport sector that would have a gender transformative approach?
So I like very much the direction the conversation goes, because I think we shouldn't be satisfied until we fully close this gender gap now. So we have to continue to push, we have to continue to be demanding, we have to continue to learn. We have to think gender from the beginning until the end of the transport programs that we design and implement. And there are many ways we have to explore all venues, whether it's procurement, whether it's involving women in design, whether it's empowering women in the operation of transport programs. I think I see the need all changing. It's not changing fast enough. And so we have to continue to be demanding. But 20 years ago, when we were discussing with some countries about, why don't we involve women in the maintenance of roads? I mean, that was totally bizarre. This is a man's work. But things are changed today, and more and more transport stakeholders are now saying, well, why don't we put a target of 50%. I know some civil works contractors who took the decision to train all the operators of their civil works equipment as women, just because it was very pragmatic. Women are more careful usually than men, and so it was a wise business decision, no? So you have these kind of changes that are occurring. We should look for them, we should encourage them, we should evaluate at the time. When we close a transport program, we should ask ourselves, what have we achieved, and how can we do more the next time? No?
Okay. Over to you, Frank. What do you think? What would a gender transformative approach in KFW's portfolio look like?
Well, I agree to what has been said in terms of the objective. The objective has to be sort of gender equality, and in order to achieve that, a lot of things have to be done. So that is very clear. As to the question what a project, transformative project is, I would be more modest actually, because I think a project cannot achieve all of that. A project can contribute to this, and therefore I think the most important thing, and for me a transformative project is a project that really changes a little bit the power structure, the representation in the decision making. If a project can do that and leave an impact in that respect, and that could be through the partner organization that there women get a stronger role in there. That could be through a project that increases participation of civil society with women organizations becoming stronger. That, for me, would be a transformative project. Otherwise, I think we are not really realistic, because with a project, we cannot change the world. With a lot of projects that do steps, we can do.
Sure, and then Chiara?
Yeah, very quickly, because this is a bank, and I was in a bank before, and you also asked a bank. Procurement is a very powerful tool, especially if you're in this field. And I'm really happy, again, I'm citing some examples. For us at the African Union, 13 years ago, we said 10% of the funds should go, for Africa, should go to women-owned enterprises. The African Development Bank has target, Kenya has, I think that the target is 30%. So we are very conscious about procurement. Money, when there's money involved, things, believe me, change very fast. And I know from experience, okay? So I think it's important, and I really agree G20 for this, which I have not read. The G7, sorry. One other thing about setting example, by the way, the African Union is the only international organization in the world where women and men are equally represented by law. The elected officials are by law 50-50. We cannot change that. So again, take the drastic measure, set the rules, stick to it, and this is how we transform. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, over to you, Chiara. Oh.
Okay. The question is, do you want to achieve gender equality, or do you want to improve the transportation system for everyone? This is the question, in fact, if we want to transform. In fact, at the end of the day, what is very easy, it's to have by the way, sorry, seeing you, I was last week at the Bal des Polytechniciens, and you know what? You cannot imagine now a woman at more than 20%. And it was amazing. And you know what? When I went to go to congratulate them, most of them said, we are there because we want to change the world. We are there to have a positive impact. We are not there to become manager. We are not there because we want to be there to transform the world. And this is something, it's not women against men, but we are much more human-centered. We want to work for purpose. And if you say in transportation, how much we can bring, but not only at the management level. It's easier to become president of Air France or president of the RATP than to attract and retain talents at all levels in middle management. It's very difficult in transportation, including the people who drive the car, etc. And what's the most difficult? It's what we said before in this very interesting panel. In fact, is to design the city in which we want to live. I have a good friend who is the managing director of a big company of architects. And in big conference, you say, when we design a city, where, by the way, lives 60% of the population, we don't want to make a wonderful architectural gesture in the desert. We want something cozy, comfortable, practical. We want to externalize our house, our home, and find it where we can find the useful thing for dinner, we can hold distance, etc., etc., etc. And this is something very human-centered. If we think the public transportation, but the design, the cars. You remember when we did the crash cars at the beginning? What were you doing? We were saving the electronic, because the man who had designed the car with our drivers didn't think about the person, in fact, didn't think about the driver. The most important and precious thing was yes, because they just externalized and for women, I don't say it's not the case for men. Please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. We are so human-centered that the first thing is always the human being, and taking care of diversity, taking care of that everybody feels comfortable. And this, I think, would be the really big difference, but at all levels, not only governance, at all levels. And this, I think, is something that we can really improve if we raise the number, and I come back on what I always say, the number of women in cybersecurity, of women in only 11%, women engineer, only 11%, women in climate change, only 16%, etc., etc. Because at the end of the day, when you want to make a road, you take an engineer. And if you don't have engineers, woman, you take a man. Talent has no gender. Talent is talent. And talent, we need from 5 years in each continent, because we have a lot to learn from Africa, by the way, in this term. At 5 years old, we have to explain to our children that the future, if you want to be there to work for purpose, we have to have the codes to learn, not only to code, but to learn mathematics, to learn science, to learn technology, to learn digitals. Otherwise, if we don't have the same opportunity than men, we will never get it.
Great. All right. And so, and also, because we are completely out of time, Lindsey, I'll also add on you, put additional pressure to make some final comments as well.
No pressure. It was actually, I'll skip it because it was exactly what I wanted to say. What really worries me is STEM. What really worries me is the lack of women going into these careers. 22% is normally the figure that we say in Europe for women working in transport and worldwide. That figure is not moving for decades. That figure, a decade, has not shifted. Why? COVID didn't help at all. But that's what worries me, because now at UITP we managed to go out and find the women, bring them in, and we have much better representation and much better implication of women in our activities, and it gives hope for the future. But that's only a short term for now. The problem is the grassroots, and I think it's not just, you can't just look at education, it's about societal norms. Like has already been said, societal norms about why is it normal that a man can go on a business trip and just drop the pen, and a woman doesn't want to? They have care responsibilities, they feel guilty, they need a nanny. It's brilliant, your example, but that should be the norm. That should be the norm, that everyone should have their own responsibilities. Caring is a good thing. Being part of society is a good thing. That should be what's normalized. And that's what worries me a little bit, is that there is change and there is movement towards better gender equality and awareness and all of that. But we're not really going to the heart. And until we get to really the heart of societal change, then transformation is going to be quite superficial, unfortunately. But I don't want to end, you said wrap up, I don't want to end on a negative note, because the whole day has been full of inspiration. I think we all know what needs to happen. It's the devil is in the details now of how we really make it happen.
Yep, and I think I'm just going to build on what you're saying, is the devil is in the details, but we need the resources. And I think ensuring that, again, budgets help us address infrastructure as social projects, and they accept gender transformation as our end goal, I think can really then help us move towards it. So with this, I'm going to close this panel, and thanks to all of you for being such a great